the game was different, right? The rules was different. The ball was different.
The Euro style is different in America.
The Euro style was a lot different than America.
That's the first time y'all seen that Euro step too, huh?
Absolutely.
Hey guys, Coach D here. Just a quick reminder, this episode was shot back in September, so a couple of things have changed. If you are unsure, please check with your compliance officer of the school that you are attending or that you wish to attend. The need for SATs and ACTs have changed, transfer rules have changed, and years of eligibility have changed. So please make sure you check out all the information that you need with the relevant parties, and enjoy the show. Really fortunate this afternoon to be joined with Dr. Smith, one of my lecturers from the University of New Mexico. She worked in NCAA compliance. So Dr. Smith, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Dan. Thanks for having me on. Like Dan said, my name is Dr. Allison Smith. I'm in my third year as an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico, teaching in sports administration. And before I got my PhD, I worked in the NCAA compliance office for a Division II school, Wingate University. It's outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And also worked in the admissions department, specifically admitting student athletes. So I only worked with the athletic side of admissions. So I know a decent amount about Division I and II compliance and eligibility. So I'm hoping I can answer some questions for your group today.
Marvelous. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be talking with you today. And I think this is a side of the college aspect that gets overlooked a lot of the time. A lot of recruits, a lot of families just say, hey, I want to go to Duke, I want to go play for Louisville, and that's it. There's not much else that goes into question. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be good to kind of hear some information from you. All right, to start us off, what does it mean to be eligible? What's the difference in being accepted into an institution and not being able to play? Or, can you talk us through that?
Yes, there's a lot of different statuses, and I think this is why it can be really confusing when a parent goes from like, I want to go to, or a kid goes from, I want to go to Duke or Louisville to like, what does that mean to actually get in? And so there's like standards that need to be really understood. So there's the NCAA standard, and then there's the institution standard, and they are not always the same. So that can be really confusing as well for a prospective student athlete. So first and foremost, to be eligible with just the NCAA, right? There's standards for Division I versus Division II. Division III has its own set of rules. Juco has its own set of rules. NAIA has its own set of rules. Okay, so we're going to go over each one of them like really briefly. Mm-hmm. So for Division I and II, you have to have 16 core courses. So I can send you guys a link to what that means. Basically, you have to have so many classes in English, history, science, math, whatnot, and it breaks down to 16 core courses from your high school. You have to have for Division I eligibility at least a 2.3 grade point average in those core courses. And then you have a sliding scale approach to the ACT and the SAT test scores. So what that means is that the higher your GPA is, the lower your test score has to be for eligibility purposes. The lower your GPA is, the much higher your test score needs to be. So there's actually like a document and a scale, and I will send it to you after this, Dan, and you can send this link out to your viewers. And basically you kind of like look at where's my GPA, and then, this is the test score I would need to probably get in terms of the NCAA. Okay. Division II is exactly the same. Still 16 core courses, still the sliding scale approach. The only difference is the GPA is a little bit lower. It's a 2.2 within those core courses. So as you hear that, you're like, that's not that bad, right?
Yeah.
That's not that hard. What makes it difficult to get into different universities is that the universities themselves have different standards. For example, you mentioned Duke at the introduction. They would not accept a student with a 2.3 and a lower SAT or ACT score. For example, my husband worked for the Duke softball team for a period of time, and they don't accept students that don't have an ACT of at least a 27. So that's pretty high. That's hard. And they expect high GPA students, and that's a Duke standard, right? So you can be eligible from the universe or from the NCAA and still maybe not be the kind of athlete that would get into a Duke versus a Louisville versus a New Mexico State. Each one of those schools also has standards. So that's something that you have to think about when you're looking at different schools is where's my GPA and test scores, and would they allow me to probably do well there? Not just like get in, but do well at that institution, right?
Okay.
So if you're a Juco or a Division III institution, if you're looking at them or coaches have contacted you from either of those types of universities, all their eligibility is determined by the institution. So basically, like, I don't know what their eligibility is. Each school is completely different.
Okay.
So when you get contacted by a coach from a Juco or a D3 institution, you need to ask really upfront and honestly, like, well, what would it take for me to get into this school? Because each D3 is different. Each Juco is different. And a Juco just means a junior college, a 2-year college degree. So you can come out with an associate. So that tends to be like community colleges.
Okay. So the NCAA or, the governing body, what is the governing body for a Juco, or is there different ones?
Yeah, so they have their own governing institution. It's like NCJAA or something like that. They have their governing body as well. And the same with the NAIA, they have their own governing body. And the NAIA has some pretty set standards. I don't know if you want me to mention those too.
Oh yeah, sure, definitely.
Okay.
We've got guys going.
NAIA is 18 on the ACT or a 970 on the SAT. Those are the minimums. And then a minimum score of a 2.0 GPA on a 4-point scale. So for international students, that can be a little bit difficult because a lot of times their universities don't have the traditional American 4.0 scale. So you just have to work with someone at that institution to get your transcripts kind of like interpreted to what it would be on the American scale. And then you have to graduate in the top half of your class. So you need to be in the top 50%. Now, you only have to, this is why compliance is so fun and confusing.
Oh, wow.
You only have to meet 2 out of those 3 standards. So you either meet the test score and the GPA, or you meet the top 50% in the GPA, or however it works out.
So question, sorry. So when you say your class, do you mean, is that in terms of people applying, or you mean 50% in your school where you studied?
In your school, your high school class. Your graduating high school class. Are you in the top 50% or the bottom 50%? If you're in the bottom 50% and you wanted to go to an NAIA institution, you would need the test score minimum and the GPA minimum to get in.
Wow.
Now, for the most part, these minimums are not too difficult, right? Like that's a C average for the most part, and a pretty C average test score, right? So thinking about that, like if you're a student who maybe just like hasn't really clicked with like high school material or that kind of model, like maybe going to a Juco or an NAIA where the standards are a little bit lower and you get a little more personal attention because they tend to be smaller universities to get your grades up and to do better at the college level before you either transfer or maybe you just stay at an NAIA for 4 years. Whereas Division I and II are a little bit more competitive in the types of athletes they recruit. So although these are the minimums for the NCAA, you might be competing against 15 other basketball players who have a 3.8 and a 27 on the ACT, and a coach is probably going to pick that athlete over one that isn't doing as well if their talents are about the same.
Okay, yeah, it definitely does. When you was talking about the ACTs and the SATs, and you was giving us the scores, for those that don't know, what's the maximum you can get so they can kind of gauge? You said Duke's like a 28 on the ACT, so what's the maximum?
The maximum, I'm pretty sure the ACT is a 36.
Okay.
So a 27 is in the upper percentile for like Duke athletics. They tend to want students that are 27 and above. SAT, I'd have to Google it because it's changed. Because when I took it, it's different. And then when it's been, let's see, SAT
The maximum score.
Yeah. 1,600.
Okay. So, and what would you say is a good score? I know it's on a sliding scale, but you say if someone got like an 1,100.
I would say, you want to be, a 1,200 or above. If you're wanting to go to like a more prestigious academic institution, right?
Okay.
But like I said, though, there's a sliding scale approach. If you're somebody like me, I didn't take tests well. I still don't take standardized tests well. They make me really nervous and they give me panic. So like I didn't do particularly great on my SATs, but I had a 3.8 in high school. So it was like, okay, this works out. So they did that on purpose to try to help athletes and students who just don't take tests well to not just have a set standard. The sliding scale is supposed to help you.
Okay. Ivy League schools, what would be, to get into an Ivy League school, and I know they don't normally do athletic scholarships, but they do academic. And what would we be looking at if you wanted to go to an Ivy League? Like what kind of scores would they have to be? Would you have to have a 4.0 and a 1,600 to get in?
You need to be basically as close to the top as humanly possible for Ivy League. Most Ivy Leagues are admitting students that are above a 4.0 range. So they're taking, AP, which is basically college credit classes in high school, and they're getting higher GPAs for making A's in those or B's in those. And then most Ivy League kids are as close to the perfect score as possible. Like they're not off by very much. So that can be intense. But the one thing that's nice about being an athlete is there tends to be just a little bit of a softer approach to admitting you, right? Like that. I'm not trying to say that like athletes aren't intelligent. They're super intelligent, but like they tend to take that into account. So athletics can maybe get away with somebody having a 1,400 instead of a 1,600 at Harvard, or I don't know. But I don't know the set scores. I think that would be a better question for someone that's looking at Ivy League to go and actually like email an admissions counselor at one of the Ivy League institutions or try to find their information. A lot of times it's on their websites, like what they want in terms of, scores or GPAs. And I know Ivy Leagues really look favorably upon people that have like lots of, clubs and experiences and volunteer hours. So there's a lot that goes into an Ivy League application versus a state school or a different private school.
Fair enough. Okay, I think that's really good to know. We've had one of the female athletes. She went to the University of Pennsylvania. She, spoke a little bit about that. Are there grading requirements to play in the NCAA and Naia and Juco?
Yeah.
And do they need to be upkept as well?
Yes, very much so. Okay, so to get into school, right? We're just talking about from high school into college. You have to meet those requirements that I outlined before to be what's called a qualifier, meaning you are able to receive aid, so receive scholarship money or financial aid or academic scholarship money.
Okay.
You're able to immediately come onto campus and play and compete and practice. If for some reason that just wasn't quite there, you could be at a Division II, what's called a partial qualifier, which means you have not met the GPA or test score requirement. So again, thinking about that D2 test score requirement. So you've not met one or the other, and that's okay. Basically, they give you a year at the institution to kind of like get adjusted to college, get your grades up. So you can still receive money, you just can't compete for that whole first year. So you can practice, you can be with the team, you can receive scholarship money, both academically or athletically. Most of the time, if you're someone that's partial qualifier, it's probably just athletic money at that point, until you prove otherwise. But you just can't compete. And that only happens at Division II.
Oh, not at Division I?
Correct. So this is like a weird thing that only Division II does.
Okay.
At Division I, you're basically either a qualifier or a non-qualifier. You either meet all the requirements and you can get scholarship money and you can play and compete and practice, or you're a non-qualifier. It means you don't meet the academic requirements and you can't get money and you can't compete and you can't practice. So you can basically be a member of a team, but you not really are a member of a team yet because you can't really do anything.
So you can't practice, you can't like weight room or anything.
Right. And so most of the time when somebody, let's say, has said, let's say you had an athlete that so they wanted to go to Louisville. Okay, we'll just take this example. And they just didn't really have a great experience in high school. And for whatever reason, just didn't do as well academically. And so Louisville says, hey, you're a non-qualifier, which means if you come here, you're coming here and just getting in based on Louisville's academic admission standards. And for that whole first year, you can't practice, can't play, can't get scholarship money as a, let's say, basketball player. So if I'm the athlete, I was like, man, that really stinks, right? Like, I really wanted to go to Louisville. What we tend to hear is those kids that are non-qualifiers get told, why don't you go play at a Juco for a year and get your grades up? Why don't you go to an NAIA and get your grades up? And then you can transfer back to the Division I school. So that's like that, most of the time when somebody's a non-qualifier, they're not going to go just sit on the bench and sit in the stands at a Division I school. They're going to go somewhere else and play and get their grades worked out and get maybe some extra help and tutoring and just kind of learn more about how to like study better or do well in school. And then they transfer back to a Division I or II school.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And is it the same? Do you know if it's the same at the NAIA level and the Juco level? So do you have to have a certain grade point average or a certain standard of grades to play at those levels?
There is a standard. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. So there's always a minimum standard no matter where you are, right? Like if somebody's offering you money to come to school there's going to be something tied to it. I do know that at Jucos and NAIs, it's lower. It's not as strenuous. So again, that's why we see a lot of athletes that have struggled maybe in high school. They go down there first and get the support and help, smaller classroom sizes, small team setting. And then after that 1 or maybe even 2 years, maybe they decide to stay for 2 years at a Juco. Then they transfer to a Division I or II institution. But yes, there's always a score. There's always a minimum. And
do they need to be upkept as well? So, let's say I came in, I've done my first semester. I'm currently at a 3.5 or, 3.2. And then the following semester, I've broken up with my girlfriend. I'm really missing home. And my grades dropped to, a 2.6 or a 2.7 or whatever. Will I still be eligible to play, even though, I might have started off good or I'm a really good student? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is like the fun question, right? Because, so basically, yes and no is the easiest way to answer this. Okay, so let's say we'll take Dan as an example here. You enter at UNM, you do really well through the fall. Let's say you make a 3.0. And then in the spring, like you said, your girlfriend breaks up with you. It's basketball season. You've never encountered a basketball season. You're a freshman. You're playing. You have a bad semester. Let's say you make like a 1.8 or something.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't expect this of you, really, Dan. This is our hypothetical, Dan. Then you might be in jeopardy of your GPA falling too far below the minimum standard for kind of like each semester, each year. What we tend to see is that coaches will require or encourage their athletes to go to summer school to get their grades back up. So basically you have 1 full calendar year to keep your grade at the minimum. So that's why we see so many athletes that end up in summer school. I'm sure you've seen this trend or know of this trend. So if you had like a bad fall or spring, then you can use summer school to get your GPA back up to the standard it needs to be at. Again, the NCAA has a standard, but so does every institution. And so does every coach. So like, for example, my coach, you couldn't fall below a 3.0. The coach I played for. If you did, there was some some remedial things you had to do. But I think the standard at our athletic department was only like a 2.0, which isn't hard. I mean, it's a C average. It can be done. And I know that kind of carries throughout the NCAA, is like the NCAA standards throughout continuing. It's called continuing eligibility or continuing education, as you need to stay right around a 2.0 or a 2.5. It kind of increases as you go through your degree. And if you don't meet that in that year period, you can use summer school credit hours to try to get back up.
Nice. Okay, so that's the real reason for summer school, is trying to make sure that they're good, or to kind of help erase.
Or if you're somebody like me, so I was a good student, but I really understood myself well enough to know that like during softball season, it was really difficult for me to take a lot of credit hours. So full semester term is 12 credit hours, right? So that tends to be a 3-hour class. So you would take 4 classes. Not every institution is 3 hours, some are 4, but traditionally most schools have 3-hour classes. So sometimes I would take more classes in the fall, knowing that my spring needed to be lighter because that was softball season. Or I would take summer classes, knowing that I could lighten up my spring semester. I was always trying to like compensate for that spring semester needed to be easier because that was softball season. I was going to miss more class. I was going to be away from campus more, less time to study. So it's not always remedial. Sometimes it's strategic.
Okay. So, that makes sense. And I guess that will help. As you said, it kind of helps the workload. You know, you say, okay, I'm going to take a class, less credits during basketball season, and then I'll do more outside of basketball season, and so on and so forth. So, that's pretty good strategy, I think.
It worked for me. I don't know how it works for everybody else, but it worked for me.
When does your eligibility clock, starting from, high school coming over? There's been a lot of confusion and stuff. Is it age dependent or graduation dependent? Is it both?
Yeah, so each division and each section has a different rule. So we'll go through each of them. And for international students, this is super important because the systems that international students typically play in overseas are very different than the United States systems. And what I mean by that is like the travel, AAU, amateur level is very different overseas than it is in the US. And so what we don't want to ever have happen is any athlete ever take any compensation in any form for playing. So no prize money, no goodie bag, no nothing. Do not take money, do not take gifts for your performance, because that can be counted against you. Because basically the NCAA rules that you are a professional athlete and you're no longer amateur if you take some kind of reward for your play.
I mean, so you can't get a gift card, or you can't. Here's a Subway voucher. You won a tournament.
You're not supposed to take stuff like that. Now, this is why I say the NCAA is fun and confusing, and compliance is fun and confusing. There's always an exception to the rule, but I've seen a lot of international students get flagged for playing in semi-pro leagues or taking money for prizes and tournaments or something, and then they lose eligibility when they come to the US to play. So my advice is always just don't take it. Just be like, thank you for the Subway gift card, but I'm going to decline that. It's as silly as that seems, you never want to have that stuff held against you. And I think it's easier to just be super conservative than anything. But in terms of eligibility clock, Juco does not have a clock. The NAIA does not have a clock.
Oh, there's still time. Let's go.
Yeah, neither does the D3 school. Okay, so what does that mean though? Just because we say there's no clock doesn't mean there's not some rules. There's also no age limits for all three of those. So Juco, NAIA, and Division III. But once you decide to start competing in any of those 3 levels, you only have, at least at the NAIA and Division III, you only have 10 semesters to complete 4 years of competition. Does that make sense? So you basically get an extra year to kind of pause or stop your clock if you need to, if life happens, or this is how you see people take red shirts and still have eligibility, things like that. If your school works on a quarter system, which is super confusing. I hope no one is going to go somewhere where there's a quarter system. It's 15 quarters. So I know.
Okay.
That's why I'm like, just go somewhere where it's a semester. It's so much easier to figure out. But the Juco, you only have 2 years to play because it's only a 2-year school.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Division 2 and Division 1 are more fun, more confusing.
Okay.
So Division 2, it's the same rule, 10 semesters for 4 years of competition, but you can pause your clock in Division 2. So what does that mean, right? Because everybody's like, what? What this means is that if you decide to drop down to part-time hours and you're not competing, that time does not count against you. So what does that mean? I've seen football players do this really well. Okay, so they, especially at the end of their degree, they decide to drop down after football season ends. So let's say you're a junior, you just had finished up your football season, which was in the fall. You drop to part-time in the spring because you're not competing, right? You're just having spring practice. And so that semester doesn't count towards your clock. Then they drop back, they come back up to full in the fall. So they can like do this system where they try to like finagle a little bit more in Division 2, but it's still 10 semesters. So you can't just do this forever. You can only kind of milk the system for like 1 year.
But then if it's paused, then but it is 10. I don't know. That's pretty clever though.
Yeah, I had a football player that did that when I was working in compliance, and I was like, technically that's not against the rules. We can figure this out. But Division 1, because I'm sure most of your athletes are probably wanting to go to Division 1 schools.
Everyone wants to go to Division 1, and everyone wants to go to Duke.
Right, so here you go. Here's the scenario here. Division 1, your clock starts the moment you graduate from high school. So as soon as you graduate, if you don't enroll in that first semester after graduation, your clock has already started. So
really?
Yeah. So what does that mean? It means that you have 5 calendar years to complete 4 years of competition. So if I graduate in spring of 2021 from high school, and I decide I want to go backpack through Europe and delay my entrance into college until spring of 2022, I can do that. And hopefully I've got a scholarship and a coach and a team that's cool with that. But I don't get that fall back. My clock has already started.
So that's interesting. So do you not get a gap year? That's the question. There's a lot of players that go to prep schools, go to academies for a year and all the rest of it. Are they not allowed that a year period between graduation and getting into school?
Traditionally, no, but there are always exceptions and waivers that you can fill out to.
Okay. There's always an exception.
Why the NCAA compliance manual is 328 pages long is because every time they create a rule, somebody's like, I think I can find a loophole, and then they have to like make an amendment and make an addendum. And so I always tell people, this is what I think, let me check the rule book or let me get back to you, because there's always an exception, there's always a waiver, there's always a 10.8.2 B, C, D, F, E, like yeah. So traditionally most students, especially in the United States, will graduate high school and immediately enroll that first fall term at their institution. Okay. And so that's why international students sometimes can be hurt by that clock, is if they don't do that. But again, there are exceptions, there are waivers that you can fill out. There are circumstances where the NCAA can be vetoed to allow you to not have your clock started. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's a lot to remember. So
I mean, hey, and this is for me, this is the reason why it's really good to have you here with us today, because I'm sure there's a lot of families that are watching now, a lot of players and stuff, and like, oh man, I thought it was this way, and just having an idea and making a move from that. So yeah, this is absolutely great. Are there exemptions for injuries or reclassification?
Yeah, you can redshirt if you get injured, which is what most people tend to do. However, there's a fun rule about redshirting. Nothing is as simple as it's stated, right?
Okay.
When you redshirt, you have to redshirt after a certain or before a certain percentage of the season. And so what that means is if you want to come in as a freshman and you just think like, let's say you're our imaginary basketball player that wants to go to Duke, right? There's a ton of seniors and juniors on the team. And the coaches are like, hey, we really want you to come here, but we do advise that you redshirt because you're not gonna see a lot of playing time in your first year. So some freshmen especially will take a redshirt year. And what that means is that they basically just get like a pause to like just do well in school and to practice with the team. Sometimes coaches encourage it for players that are just not quite at the level they need to be at Division I level. And so that doesn't hurt you, right? So you're still on the team, you just can't compete. If you compete in even a second of the game, your red shirt is void. So that's like a fun little tidbit, like don't let that happen to you. Now there's also medical red shirts where if you get hurt, you can apply for a medical red shirt, which also again keeps your clock from going too fast against you. And that again has a percentage of the amount of season that has been played at the point where you get hurt. And I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but basically I think it's like 20 or 30%. Once you've passed so much competition in the season, they don't allow a medical red shirt anymore. So like you just kind of like lose that. Let's say for your basketball player example, if they get hurt in the 5th game of the season, then they can probably get a medical red shirt, no problem. If they get hurt in the last 5 games of the season, they're not going to be given a medical red shirt. They're just kind of going to be like, that stinks. I'm sorry you got hurt.
Just tough luck, Chuck.
Yeah, tough luck, Chuck. Maybe next year.
Next year.
Heal and work hard all summer to fix it. So yeah, there's like a percentage of the season, and every sport has a different percentage and how that looks, especially with the amount of games played. So that's why I don't want to say like it's this, but I think it's about 25% of the season. Once you surpass that, they kind of are like, no. But again, I think that's where you've got to talk to the coach. That's where you've got to talk to the compliance officer and make sure you understand what that is for your particular sport, because some sports are much longer than others. Their seasons are different, the amount of games they play. So like the percentage looks different for every sport.
Okay. Is it possible to, I guess, combine shirts? So could you have a regular red shirt and then a medical red shirt, or have a medical red shirt and then red shirt again after that?
Yeah, this is where you see players that are there for like 6 years, right? Because you're like, how the heck is what's-his-face been at this institution forever? He's like 27 years old. He's got a full beard. Like, how is he there? And that's totally a joke, fans. That's totally a joke. No, you can combine red shirts, but you can only have, so let's say like, again, our imaginary Dan goes to Duke and Coach K tells him, Dan, I just think it'd be best for you to redshirt this first year, get some more experience, get some playing time in year 2. So you're like, okay, coach, whatever you say, I'm on a full ride, whatever you want me to do. So you redshirt. Well, let's say in your junior year, you get hurt in the 5th game of the season. You can take a medical redshirt too. Okay. So you can have both, but you can't have more than 2.
You can't have more than, okay. And what is the...
So if you got hurt again your senior year, they would tell you, tough luck, Chuck.
Man, they said that.
So you get 2, shirts. Basically, you get 2 red shirts. That's like the max that they'll give you. Now, I say that, but then like look at coronavirus and how that's affected the NCAA and eligibility. And so like maybe this rule will change. I'm not sure.
Okay. There was talks about reclassifying juniors and sophomores. Not juniors, sorry, sophomores and freshmen. So
it's going to be super messy for the upperclassmen, because one little tidbit about how college athletics works is when a senior graduates, right, their money has already probably been distributed to a freshman coming in. right? So like, there's only so much money that's given every year. There's only so many scholarships per team, right? So every sport gets a certain amount of scholarships. Some sports are allowed to break those up into percentages over a certain amount of players, especially at like the Division II level. You see this a lot. Like, so I only have, let's say for softball, I have 12 scholarships total, but we tend to carry a roster of 24 athletes. I could like break a scholarship into force or half and just Some sports you can't do that in, like basketball is one of them. Football is harder to do that in. Volleyball, like there's certain sports where they don't allow you to break it apart like that. So that's something to ask too, like whatever sport that your clients and your people that are watching your film are into, like they need to ask about that. But once you've been like given the scholarship, typically coaches are promising that for 4 years. Some schools are really great about that. Some schools basically are like, listen, you know, you signed a national letter of intent, you know, the signing day that everybody panics and loves to publicize. Technically the NLI is only for 1 year traditionally. Some schools have moved to where they will guarantee that money for 4 years to an athlete. Some schools are still on a 1 year. So there is the potential that somebody could tell you like, you know, again, good luck, Chuck.
Tough luck, Chuck.
Yeah, we've given your money away. And so coronavirus makes this super interesting for upperclassmen because a lot of times coaches have already decided like, okay, for my next class, I've already thought about how
spend that money.
So when a senior says like, hey, I want to stay because of coronavirus, now coaches are like,
tough luck, Chuck.
How do we, I don't know that it's tough luck, Chuck, yet, but I think that there's going to be a lot of questions that the NCAA has to answer here soon.
Man, Chuck's having a rough ride, man. We've given Chuck a tough luck about 4 times now. Are there any, while we're talking about shirts, are there any other shirts? I know I was speaking to a player yesterday and he said there's a gray shirt. So I was like, is it like the Infinity Stones? There's like a yellow shirt and a blue shirt, and I don't know how many shirts.
No, it's just red shirt and gray shirt. The gray shirt just means you delay the start of school until the second term of your freshman year.
Second term of your, okay.
So you just come in a semester later.
Okay, and why would you do that? What's the purpose of?
Maybe you just needed some time. Maybe you had some life events happen. Maybe coronavirus happened and you didn't want to go to online school, so you decided to wait till spring. Maybe your coach and you had a conversation about it. It tends to have a negative connotation, like, hey, you're not ready for college, but it's not always meant to be that. Sometimes it could just be like, life has happened and I'm gonna take a second before I come to school.
And how does that pause your clock as well? Will you?
It's a tough one. Again, yes and no. That's something that would be better asked if a coach decides and you decide to do a gray shirt, like ask a lot of questions about what that means and will that affect your eligibility over the whole time, because whether you do it at different levels changes it. And so I don't want to give like a yes or no right now. I think it would be best like if somebody's getting asked by a coach to do that, or maybe they've thought about doing that, to just recheck with the compliance office at whatever institution you're looking at to ask more questions about what that means, because obviously that is meant to help people that need help, but you also don't want that to take off the time that you can play.
Okay, fair enough. It's crazy.
The answer to everything in compliance is what kind
yes
of
and no. Like yes and no. Are there any implications for when you transfer? There's I think at the high school level now, I'm finding out that if you transfer, let's say your sophomore year to your junior year to a different school, then you might have to set out a year or what. Like, what is the deal in college?
Yes, there's a bunch of different rules about transferring, and transferring is changed dramatically in the last couple of years because of the invention of the transfer portal. So what does that mean? What is the transfer portal? Everybody wants to know what that means. So basically, let's say that Dan has gone to Duke and he hates it and he's just not happy.
Not enough court time. Yeah.
He didn't redshirt and he's just not playing and he doesn't get along with the team or the coaches, and so he's decided he wants to go to Carolina because he's smart like that and he wants to go to a better school.
Oh man.
One that Dr. Smith likes more. Just kidding, but not really. Okay. So let's say you wanted to transfer just out of the school. You would have to go talk to the compliance office and basically indicate that you would like to transfer. Typically, you would also have had a conversation with the coach, and this is where it gets super fun for athletes because it's so hard to go into someone's office and say you want to transfer. And I transferred, so I understand this from a personal level. Okay. I had to walk into my coach's office and be like, look, this just isn't for me. I was playing at a Division I school up in New York, and I was really far from home and just kind of miserable, just not happy. Wasn't playing, got hurt, didn't redshirt, all of the bad things that you shouldn't do, right? I did them. So once you establish with your coach that you're going to transfer, you go and talk to the compliance office, and they enter your name into what's called the transfer portal. So the NCAA recently, and I think it was like 2016 or 17, invented what's called the transfer portal to make transferring easier for athletes and for those poor compliance officers having to do all the paperwork. So instead of it taking a really long time to fill out all this traditional paperwork and submit it to conference offices and like get approval for all of this, they invented the transfer portal where your name goes in and coaches immediately can see who wants to leave. So there's like dates involved in that. So it's not just like poof, obviously, like now I can take anybody. There's dates for each sport as to when a coach can now access you in the transfer portal. So what that means is after a certain date, so for fall sports, it's October 15th. Basically after October 15th, if you're in the transfer portal, a coach can now contact you.
Okay.
So they can say like, hey, I see that you want to leave Duke. Like, have you thought about coming to Carolina or Louisville or Wingate or wherever? Like,
yeah.
They try to go after you at that point. Because a lot of times, think about all these high caliber players, like people know about you and they knew about you when you were in high school. So like when you enter the transfer portal, it's like the chirping begins, like who's going to grab this person? Yeah. So in order to transfer though, you have to be in good academic standing. So this is why keeping your grades up is super important throughout college because no one's going to take you if you're not doing well in school.
Okay.
You have one, this is where it gets fun. You have one transfer without penalty if you're going down, especially. So let's say like what I did. I went from a Division I school to a Division II school. I didn't have to sit. So that's like super helpful for people that maybe are thinking about what division they want to play at and if they want to leave behind whatever they're at. If you move down, it's easier. Okay. So if I went Division II to III or I to III, like I never have to sit. When you move laterally, that's where it gets confusing. Most of the time, people now can get a 1 year over, right? So this is where you see athletes that file for exemptions or waivers or like reasons why they want to like not have to sit. Traditionally, if you move from a Division I to a Division I, you need to sit a year.
Okay, sure.
But again, you can file waivers and extensions and kind of like amendments to that.
Ways
right?
around, loopholes, okay.
Maybe it's that your coach left the university. Like there are lots of reasons why people transfer and why they leave. And so some of them are out of the student athlete's control. And they shouldn't be penalized to stay at a university when like their entire coaching staff gets fired or leaves, that makes sense. Like there are circumstances right like that where they allow transfers to get approved, but I'm sure you've seen in the media, and I'm sure people listening to your podcast have seen them in the media, like there are times when people transfer and they're like, oh, it should be a shoe-in, and they deny them, and you're like, what? So there's no like secret formula. The only secret formula I can tell you if you want to transfer is if you go down, you'll never have to sit.
If you have to transfer twice, would you like definitely lose a year? So you said there's loopholes or whatever. If you know, Duke was no good, North Carolina was no good, so I'm going to, you know, Florida State. I'm like, Florida's the place, the weather's great, you know, I'm going to
Yeah. Oh, that's hard. I would say you're gonna have to sit at least at one of those. Like,
Okay.
there's not too many times. Let me see if I can look real fast on this. So there's a bunch of like little guides that are really helpful on the NCAA's website. One of them is the 4-year transfer guide. One of them's if you're going from a 2-year school to a 4-year school. Some of them, it's called what's called swirl transferring. This is super fun. You go 2, 4 years back to 2, or like 2, 2, 4. Like, it's super confusing. Like, let's not worry about too much of that.
Yeah.
But
That's swirling.
Swirling, transfer swirling. So like there's a bunch of stuff on these guides that kind of explains more about like how to make sure that you're not going to be the transfer athlete that ends up having to sit, or like what that looks like, or are you somebody that is okay with sitting, and so what does that mean for you? So I can send you the links to these because that would probably be easy to me.
Yeah, that's
I don't
great.
want to go too far down the transfer hole because it's super confusing.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot. It sounds like every element, especially dealing with compliance, is super interesting. And it's weird because, like, you know, the majority of what you said is like, okay, here's the rule, but then we can write, you know, sign a waiver or, you know, get you out of having to follow that rule.
Yeah, like there's all kinds of exceptions to the rule. Like my husband was a transfer. He went to a 4-year institution and he decided he wanted to play in grad school. But he competed at a school that didn't have a Division I team. They just had club team. And so then he was granted an exception. So like, there's like a lot of times that you can get waivers or get exceptions, but that takes you as the athlete being really empowered to voice that you want to be given that waiver and exception, doing a little homework on your own or with your parents. 2, a compliance officer that's going to put in a lot of work for you, because to do the waivers, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of documentation, and so that means that person's really going to have to work really hard to get your eligibility at this new institution. So yeah, there's a lot of great resources. The division, like if you just go to ncaa.org/student athletes, there's a bunch of transfer toolkits, so guide for 4-year transfers, guides for the Division 1, 2, or 3 levels, flow charts if you want to go from a 2-year Juco to a 4-year. Like there's a lot of like good information here that can kind of help you. But I'm assuming most of your audience is high school that's going into college, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. And you know, there's going to be a couple that are watching that are needing information on transferring. So I think, yeah, it's a great thing that we're speaking about it.
I'll send you as many links as I can today that I feel like are really applicable, that help. I mean, the guides do a good job of trying to break down the really complicated to really simple. I don't know that I'm doing a good job of it today, but the guides do a good job kind of like giving you a really simple overview of what the process is like. And then obviously, like if you're somebody that's a special case, then you will have a lot of different things to deal with. But for the most part, people can transfer based on these guides pretty easily.
Okay, perfect. What advice would you give to international students thinking about, becoming collegiate students?
Yeah, my biggest advice for international students, especially just as somebody who worked with a lot of them when I was in compliance, is go to a school that fits you and what you want. Not has to be Division I, has to be Power 5, right? I think, especially in the United States, that idea of like, I have to be a Division I athlete, it reigns supreme. And the thought process is if you don't go Division I, like you're not as good, or you can't go play pro if you don't go Division I. And that's not necessarily true. If you have high talent and skills, no matter where you play, like you'll get seen. Somebody will find you. But I think it's more important to think about like, what is best for you? If you're a student who's super shy, who really likes like intimate classroom settings and time with your professor, going to a Louisville is not a good school for you. They have huge student classes, right? Going to a Tennessee, where I went for graduate school, where they have 27,000 students, is probably not going to be the greatest like school for you, because it's going to feel super big and overwhelming. You know, going to a Duke, which has 5,000 students, or an Elon, which is a Division I school in North Carolina that has about 4,000 students, like that kind of stuff matters. You need to think about like not only what's best for you athletically, but like how do you learn? What kind of resources do you need like to do well in school and in athletics? And the other big advice is like, especially for international students, because a lot of them can't visit in the United States. They have to do a lot of like virtual visits, or maybe they do get to come over for an official visit, but typically it's only like once. Ask as many questions as you can to the coaches. If there's something you really are burning and care about, like maybe it's playing time, don't be afraid to ask about it. Just ask really blatantly, like, what are the chances of me being able to play if I come here? Or maybe you really care about, I don't know, the food on campus, or your major. Like, ask questions about that. So if I want to major in biomechanics, would I be allowed to do that here? Would I have the space? Would I be allowed to cater my schedule for labs? Like, that's a great question to ask, because you don't want to get there and be like, I really want to study this degree, and then the coaching staff ends up telling you like, no, we can't work with that schedule. Like, you can't major in that. Like, that happens more than I like to say. And so just like be really courageous in asking questions to the coaches, and don't be afraid to really ask things that you really care about, because you want to get to know them, and you want to also kind of get to see a little bit into who they are as like advisors and mentors and coaches. Like, do they really care about you on academics and athletics? Do they only care about athletics? Are they going to support you if you want to go study abroad, or you want to do a more difficult major? Like, those kind of questions are really crucial, because everyone sells during visits. Everyone tells you about everything beautiful and wonderful and all their resources and all the money they have and all the cool things they have. Every school will sell you on the cool stuff. It's important to ask the really detailed questions to find what school's best for you.
I think that's a great point. I had a player who, his ambition, he wanted to play. He wanted to get a scholarship. I don't think it was particular. He didn't really care about the level, but he just wanted he wanted his education paid for. And, you know, really talented kid. And he was like, look, coach, I just want to go somewhere where the weather's nice, they've got beaches, and they do my course. And that to me was kind of like, once he understood, or once he expressed how he wanted to choose his school, I think his process, his time there was, really, he enjoyed it a lot. And I think that's, once you realize that there's more to going to a school than just the basketball, then, I think that is a big determinant factor in, selecting schools. So yeah, that's fantastic.
And I think that the perspective is that Division II and III doesn't have the same level of competition. As somebody who played at Division I and Division II, I can tell you my Division II team would have wiped the floor with the Division I team I played with. What? So don't think that just because you don't go Division I or Division I Power 5 doesn't mean you can't find a conference or an environment that's super competitive and that's going to allow you to reach your goals. I think your athlete that came to you with those kind of parameters, that was really smart, because he probably did open the door to a lot more institutions to get a full ride. I think it can be really hard when people say, like, I'm only going to go Division I, or I'm not going to go anywhere. Like, there are a lot of great schools that are Division II, III, Juco, Ncaa, where there's funding and you can play for free or pretty darn close to it. And that's better than getting in mountains of debt to go somewhere where you're not going to get to play, in my perspective. But, I'm an advocate for D2, so take it right now.
So this is I always do 2 sections of these interviews, and I should have sent you these questions, but I didn't. But it's not that difficult.
Okay.
It's the touristy bit.
Okay.
So when you played softball, you said you played D1. Where was your D1 again?
Manhattan College. It's in Riverdale, New York.
Okay, cool. And where did you play D2?
Wingate University. It's outside Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, cool. So the questions I'm going to ask are what's the weather like in both of those states?
Manhattan College. Super cold, super rainy, super snowy from the months of October to April. So that's why for me, I had a little rude awakening when I went to school there. I was like, wow, it's like pretty frigid here. And I'm sure you can tell I am from the South. So I was not prepared for that kind of cold. I've never grown up in that kind of cold. Wingate, it's typical Southern weather. It's pretty mild. I mean, even the winters, like maybe it's a month of winter. Never had a practice that was under 40 degrees, which was super awesome for a softball player who's outside all the time. So part of the reason I wanted to leave was I wanted better weather to play.
Okay, that's this section's all more like touristy, trivial, just because you never know. I know when I went to Oklahoma, I was under the illusion that it was 24/7. 80, 90 degree weather, and then when the blizzards and snow came, I had a rude awakening.
Yeah, the Midwest gets cold.
Which I didn't know. Nobody told me. I never had this information, and I was wearing anything warm I could find from Walmart. I went there and I just did like a whole I had a winter closet from Walmart. So that's great. Must see places in Manhattan.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, like all the touristy ones, like you should go to Central Park because one, it's beautiful. And two, there's like so many cool, like little touristy shows that people like are always putting on like crazy shows. Just like all the shows that you see on TV, there's always someone street artist performing in Central Park. Definitely go to the Museum of Natural History. I went 10 times while I was a student and still never saw the entire museum. It's that big.
Damn.
It's huge. Go to Chinatown. For 1, the food, 2, the shopping, 3, the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I was so blessed because Manhattan College, the 1 train, which is the train that runs all the way from the school, it literally drops off right behind the school, runs all the way down to downtown Manhattan. Okay. It's a 45-minute ride to go to Manhattan. So I did everything. I went to all the cool suburbs and parts of New York, but I mean, if you've never been to the city, you should definitely go to like Times Square and do all the touristy stuff. Go to Central Park, go see the Statue of Liberty, if they'll let you in it. Sometimes it's not, they don't allow you in it anymore. Go see the 9/11 memorial, like things like that.
What about in Wingate? Where's the best places?
Wingate is 45 minutes outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. It's out in the country. It's like really country, like farms and all that good stuff. So we had much more like of a let's have fun on campus experience. So get involved in all the clubs on campus, go to all the like cool events that they host and concerts. There's not really, I mean, there's some cool restaurants and stuff around the school, but honestly, they just built a major highway through there, so I'm not even sure what's down there anymore. It might have all changed. It's been a while since I've been back, but I think when you go to a smaller school, a lot of times they are in a little bit more remote locations or things like that, and so you just need to be super involved with all the campus activities because otherwise you're going to be bored.
Fair enough. Best place for food that you went to?
In Manhattan?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's hard. I honestly can't even tell you the name of the restaurant because it was this super sweet little Italian family, like 3 blocks up from campus, and they couldn't speak any English. They were like pure Italian. Everything was like grandma's cooking in the back. It was amazing. I don't even remember the name of it.
Can't remember. Oh man.
I know.
Awesome.
I mean, in New York, you can't go wrong. Like legitimately, you can walk out the dorm and there are 12 different restaurants, all kinds of ethnic and multicultural food. Like that was the biggest thing that was really cool for me. Like I grew up in Southwest Virginia where like barbecue or fried food is like all you have.
That's it.
So going there was like, I got to experience Indian food and, you know, African foods and different cuisines. And so that was really cool for me. But yeah, I don't know that I can remember a set restaurant because it has, I went to school there in 2007, so it's been a while.
It's been a minute. Sorry, it's fine. Well, I'm guessing by your previous answer, Wingate, you know, you didn't really go anywhere to get food, and it was like campus or nothing.
No, we had a couple like Mexican restaurants that I would highly recommend.
Ooh, okay.
One of which this is gonna sound so bad, and I'm not meaning for it to sound bad. I don't know the name of the restaurant, but if you go to campus and you ask any student, hey, where's the best Mexican restaurant to go in town? They will tell you Sketch Mex. That was the nickname of it, because it was this like little hole in the wall, like restaurant around the back of like a warehouse. And it was like, it made you were like, oh, I don't know that this is where I should be getting Mexican food, but it was the best place to eat. So anybody from Wingate will always say like, go to Sketch Mex, and you're going to have someone that's been there take you there. You're not going to know how to get there. It's like a secret thing.
You can't put it into your Uber app and
you can't put it into Uber, Sketch Mex. Nobody will know what that means.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. I like it. Exclusive. Right. So when you was in school, was you a big shoes person? Do you get a lot of sneakers and stuff?
No, not really. I'm a bigger shoe person now. Like
okay.
As an adult. No, not really. I would say like more like my big thing was always like t-shirts. At every Wingate event, they would like entice students to come buy t-shirts. I had over 100 different t-shirts from Wingate when I left. Like just going to events and stuff. Yeah. So my thing was t-shirts.
One of the questions I normally ask is where's the best place to get new kicks? But if you're not a kicks person, then I guess you wasn't worried about that when you was going to school.
Yeah, maybe Amazon. I mean,
best American holiday as a college athlete. What's the best American holiday?
Softball's hard because we didn't get to celebrate many because we're always in some sort of season. So like we didn't get fall break because we were playing, and we got to go home for Thanksgiving. And I think Thanksgiving or Christmas is probably my favorite, just because that meant I got to go home and see my family. You're towards the end of the semester, like, you know, the stress of finals, like you're about to be done. But I guess as a player, we went to Savannah, Georgia and competed in like a tournament one year where we played a couple teams, and we did like a ghost tour and like ate at some cool restaurants down on the river, and like that was my spring break that I remember because I was playing, so I didn't get to like go do spring break like a typical student. That would probably be, I guess, my best college athlete holiday.
I had a player from LMU, and I said I gave him the same question, and he was like, "Coach, man, they're all the same, man. You don't get no breaks, you don't get no time off, so there's no best holiday." Well, that's kind of funny.
Not exactly wrong there.
Yeah, I guess if you're playing, but I think, I don't know. I haven't been here yet for Thanksgiving, but I think the consensus is Thanksgiving is the best. You get, at least the evening or, the day, and you just sit, hang out and eat. And, even if you're not around your family, if you're an international student and you're not around your family, you get to be around family. That makes sense. Go to coach's house, go to, teammates' house, blah, blah, blah.
It's always a point in the semester where you need it too. Like Thanksgiving is right before finals and all the major assignments are due. And it's nice to have, like, even if it's just for the day, because, you're an in-season athlete, like it's nice to just like hit pause for the day and, hang out with teammates or other friends if you're an international student and you can't go back home. Yeah, I think Thanksgiving would probably be my favorite as an athlete.
Nice. Awesome. Where can international students get more information on eligibility?
Yes, I mean, for eligibility purposes, you can definitely go to the NCAA website. What I will say is the sooner you can register with the Eligibility Center. So the NCAA has the Eligibility Center. Typically, they tell you to register about the time you're a sophomore in high school, maybe the end of your freshman year, sophomore. You go in, you create an account, you start entering in your information for academics and athletics, and then you can start like notifying perspectives. Like you can say, these are schools I really think I want to go to, and you'll start getting some information from those institutions. But I will say most institutions have an international admissions office. Like New Mexico has this particular office that's just for international students. So I would reach out to them and express interest in the university and ask for some more information about how they can help you, because they're the office that's going to help you with your visa and with travel arrangements and things of that nature. And if you go to a smaller school that doesn't have its set international office, they will have a counselor that specifies in international student athletes or international students. So they'll have someone that like really knows the answers to your questions. So I just say do your homework and register for the Eligibility Center, go onto the NCAA's website and start becoming familiar with their resources, and then start reaching out to the schools that you're interested in into their admissions office for international students. But my like absolute best advice to international students is that they should, wherever they are like looking at as their top, 3 or 5 schools, like become very acquainted with whoever is in the compliance office. They need to become your best friend, because you're going to be in constant contact with them, because the steps, unfortunately, that international students have to go through are just so much more lengthy, because typically their transcripts don't look like United States transcripts. There's a lot more questions they have to ask about amateurism and their status and stuff. So just like whoever the compliance officer is, they need to be buddies.
And what's the best way to buddy a compliance officer?
I think so what tends to happen is a coach will say like, these are my prospective students for this coming year. Like they let the compliance office know, like these are the athletes that I'm looking at and considering. And if there's a group of international students, then they've already been flagged and told to the compliance office. So hopefully the athlete has had good contact with the head coach that they're potentially maybe wanting to, come play for. And at some point, typically there's like an email connection, but the athlete is always welcome to reach out directly to the compliance office and just say like, hey, I'm an international student and I really want to come here and I want to be on top of it. So what can I do to like be proactive to make sure that things go smoothly for my eligibility? Like that goes a long way.
Okay. Marvelous. That is a lot of information. Hopefully no one's head is exploded.
They probably are, and that's okay.
Hopefully, our guy Chuck, from all these discussions, I hope Chuck's doing okay. Moved him on a fair bit, but no, Dr. Smith, it's been an absolutely amazing experience having you here with us, giving us great content. And yeah, I think, you said you're going to send or give us the links, information afterwards. So I'll put that at the end of this video. So thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And you can feel free to share a little bit of my contact information. I don't work in compliance anymore, but if you're interested in sport management or programs about sport management, I'm happy to answer questions about stuff like that. So you can share my email and all that.
Marvelous. Thank you very much.
My name is Dr. Allison Smith. Thank you for watching the EuroStepping. It's been a pleasure to be here with you all.
The game was different, right? The rules was different. The ball was different.
The Euro style is different in America.
The Euro style was a lot different than America.
That's the first time y'all seen that Euro step too, huh?
Absolutely.